The modern human mind is in a state of permanent exile. We live in a paradox where we have more comfort than any king in history, yet our internal landscape is a battlefield of noise. If you are watching this, you probably know the feeling. The lights are off, the room is quiet, but your mind is screaming. You are overthinking. But what we call overthinking is actually a symptom of a much deeper pathology. It is the result of a soul that has lost its anchor. In psychology, we often treat overthinking as a cognitive distortion, a malfunction of the brain's executive function. We are told to just breathe or change the thought. But these are band-aids on a severed artery. To truly stop the noise, we must understand that overthinking is not just a mental habit, it is a spiritual displacement. We are suffering because we are trying to live in a time that does not exist, the future. Why does the mind spin? From a psychological perspective, overthinking is a survival mechanism gone wrong. Your brain is designed to predict threats. In the wild, a rustle in the bushes was a physical danger. Today, the rustle is an unanswered email, a debt, or the fear of social rejection. Because these threats are abstract and infinite, your brain creates infinite scenarios to solve them. This is the spiral. However, the philosophical tragedy here is what we call temporal fragmentation. We have lost the ability to inhabit the nunc stans, the ever-abiding now. Instead, we live in the nunc movens, the fleeing moment that is always slipping away. When you overthink, you are attempting to colonize the future with your worries. You are trying to control variables that are not yet real. This creates a state of ontological insecurity. You feel like you are drowning because you are trying to stand on waves instead of a rock. The great illusion of the overthinker is that thinking more will eventually lead to certainty. We believe that if we analyze the problem from one more angle, we will finally find the peace of mind we crave. But as the desert fathers of the 4th century already knew, the mind is like a wild animal. The more you chase it, the faster it runs. Christian theology offers a profound diagnosis for this. We overthink because we have replaced trust with analysis. We have replaced the anchor of the soul, Hebrews 6:19, with the weight of the ego. When the ego is the only thing responsible for our future, the burden is unbearable. The result is a mind that never rests because it feels it is the only thing keeping the world from collapsing. We have forgotten that we are creatures, not the creator. We are parts of a logos, a universal order that does not depend on our anxiety to function. The solution we will explore in this series is spiritual grounding. In physics, to ground a wire is to connect it to the earth so that excess electrical energy can be safely dissipated. Without grounding, the system burns out. Your mind is currently an ungrounded wire. You are carrying a voltage of future anxiety that your nervous system was never designed to hold. To ground yourself, you must move your focus from the horizontal line of time, where the past haunts you and the future scares you, to the vertical axis of eternity. Eternity is not a long time after you die. It is a quality of being that exists right now, outside of the clock. It is the still point of the turning world. When you anchor your identity in what is eternal, the truth of your soul, the presence of the divine, the unchanging principles of reality, the storms on the surface of your life may still blow, but they can no longer move you. When you anchor your identity in what is eternal, the truth of your soul, the presence of the divine, the unchanging principles of reality, the storms on the surface of your life may still blow, but they can no longer move you. This shift in perspective is not a mere psychological trick, but a fundamental realignment of how the human consciousness perceives reality itself. The biological prison of overthinking is built within the default mode network, DMN, of the brain. This is the neural circuitry responsible for self-referential thought, the inner monologue that narrates our lives. When we are not focused on a specific task, the DMN takes over, ruminating on past mistakes or simulating future catastrophes. In a state of chronic anxiety, this network becomes hyperactive. The ego becomes a closed loop, feeding on its own fears. To break this loop, we must understand the vertical axis of existence. While the DMN operates on a horizontal plane, constantly moving between a before and an after, spiritual grounding introduces a vertical interruption. It is the intrusion of the timeless into the temporal. The great tradition, from the Neoplatonists to the medieval scholastics, described God as ipsum esse subsistens, subsistent being itself. In this view, God is not a thing among other things, but the very ground on which all things stand. When we overthink, we are attempting to find stability in the becoming, the world of change, flux, and decay. Psychology calls this identity diffusion. We try to define ourselves by our achievements, our problems, or our plans. But all these things are subject to time. To find an anchor, one must descend deeper than the level of thoughts. We must reach the level of the transcendental I, the part of the human spirit that remains a silent witness to the chaos of the mind. This is where psychology and ancient faith converge in a practical way. The grounding process requires a neurological reset that mimics the theological act of surrender. In the Christian tradition, this is represented by the concept of abandonment to divine providence. It is the psychological realization that your cognitive capacity is finite, while the complexity of the universe is infinite. Overthinking is, at its core, a form of intellectual pride, the belief that if we think hard enough, we can play the role of God and secure our own destiny. Grounding is the humility to accept that we are held by a larger order. When you shift your focus to the eternal, you are not escaping reality, you are finally arriving at it. To inhabit the eternal is to recognize that now is the only point where the human soul touches God. The past is a memory, the future is a phantom. Yet the overthinking mind spends 99% of its energy in those two non-existent realms. By utilizing techniques from the Eastern hesychastic tradition, such as the guard of the heart, we learn to catch the logismoi, intrusive thoughts, before they become full-blown anxieties. We don't fight the thoughts. Fighting a thought only gives it more energy. Instead, we ground the thought by redirecting the mental current toward the logos. This is a literal rewiring of the brain. We are teaching the DMN to go quiet, allowing the task positive network, TPN, and the higher spiritual faculties to engage with the present moment as a sacred gift. This vertical alignment creates a psychological buffer. When a crisis occurs, the anchored individual does not react from the fragile ego, but from the interior castle, as Saint Teresa of Avila described it. This is the pragmatism of the profound. By being less of this world, the world of fleeting anxieties, you become much more effective in this world. You gain a clarity of action that the overthinker can never possess, because your energy is no longer being drained by the friction of mental simulations. You are no longer running away from a lion that doesn't exist. You are standing still in the presence of a truth that cannot be shaken. The transition from the noise of the self to the silence of the being requires a specific methodology of attention. It is not enough to understand this conceptually. One must feel the shift in the very marrow of their daily experience. We must move from the analytical mind, which dissects the world into pieces, to the contemplative mind, which perceives the whole. This is the path of moving from the what-if of the anxious imagination to the I am of the divine presence, where the heavy burden of the future is finally laid down at the feet of the eternal. The bridge between the metaphysical concept of eternity and the biological reality of a calmed nervous system is built through attention. In the lexicon of the soul, attention is the most sacred currency we possess. Where you place your attention, you place your life. The overthinking mind is essentially a mind that has suffered a theft of attention. It is being hijacked by parasitic loops of worry. To reclaim this power, we look to the technologies of presence developed within the depths of the Christian East and the contemplative West, the guard of the heart and the practice of lectio divina, reinterpreted through the lens of modern cognitive science. The guard of the heart, nepsis, is the art of spiritual vigilance. It is based on the psychological insight that an intrusive thought is not a sin, nor is it a fact. It is merely an invitation. The overthinker's mistake is that they talk to their thoughts. When a what-if scenario arises, they engage with it, argue with it, and eventually become submerged in it. The practice of nepsis teaches us to stand at the doorway of the mind like a sentinel. We observe the thought as it arises, but we do not invite it to sit at the table. In neuroscientific terms, this is metacognitive awareness, the ability to witness the firing of your own neurons without being defined by them. By anchoring ourselves in a brief, repetitive prayer or a focused word of power, like the Jesus prayer, we create a rhythmic pulse that grounds the mind's erratic electricity. This is not mindless repetition. It is the intentional synchronization of breath, heartbeat, and word. creating a state of coherence that signals to the brain that the immediate environment is safe. Furthermore, we must address the content of our mental landscape. Most overthinking is fueled by the consumption of information rather than wisdom. Information is horizontal. It is a never-ending stream of data that demands a reaction. Wisdom is vertical. It is a stable truth that invites reflection. This is where the ancient method of lectio divina becomes a pragmatic tool for the modern psychologist. Traditionally, this was a way of reading sacred texts, but psychologically, it is a method of deep encoding. Instead of scanning thousands of words on a screen, you take one profound truth, one verse, one philosophical axiom, and you ruminate on it. The word rumination here is used in its original sense, like a creature digesting slowly. You let the truth move from the intellect to the heart, which in the biblical sense is the center of the will and the seat of the subconscious. This process acts as a cognitive displacement. The brain cannot hold two contradictory states simultaneously. It cannot be fully surrendered to the beauty of a profound truth while being simultaneously consumed by the fear of a hypothetical future. By saturating the subconscious with the vertical logos, you leave no room for the horizontal noise. You are essentially installing a new operating system. This is why the integration of Christian faith and psychology is so potent. Psychology gives us the why of the mechanism, but the faith gives us the what, the objective truth that is actually worth anchoring to. Without a solid truth, mindfulness is just a vacation from a nightmare. With the truth, meditation becomes a homecoming. The pragmatic application of this atterramento, grounding, occurs in the micro moments of the day. It is the practice of statio, the holy pause between tasks. The overthinker rushes from one worry to the next, creating a cumulative stress response. The grounded individual uses the statio to reconnect with the vertical axis. Before opening an email, before starting the car, before responding to a provocation, you descend into the still point. You acknowledge that whatever is about to happen is a transient shadow compared to the enduring light of the eternal. You are not clearing your mind, you are filling your mind with the weight of being. This weight of glory, as C.S. Lewis called it, is the only thing heavy enough to keep your soul from being blown away by the winds of modern life. It is the realization that you are not a brain carrying a body, but a spirit inhabiting a temple, and that temple is currently being flooded by the peace that surpasses understanding. The final stage of spiritual grounding is the movement from coping to transfiguration. Most psychological interventions aim for symptom management, the reduction of the noise to a tolerable level. But the union of psychology and the eternal seeks something more radical, the transformation of the mind's very orientation. To truly stop overthinking, one must eventually face the root of all anxiety, which is the fear of non-being, the fear that we are alone in a chaotic universe. The antidote is the logos, the recognition that reality is not a series of random accidents, but a meaningful narrative directed by a supreme intelligence. When you align your personal will with this universal will, the psychological friction of overthinking begins to dissolve. This is the pragmatism of trust. In the state of overthinking, we act as our own savior. We believe that our vigilance is the only thing standing between us and catastrophe. This is an exhausting and ultimately delusional state of being. The atterramento espiritual, spiritual grounding, reaches its peak when we realize that we are not the protagonists of a tragedy, but participants in a divine comedy. In this framework, even the threats we spend hours overthinking are seen through a new lens. They are either trials to strengthen the soul or illusions to be ignored. By placing the future into the hands of the eternal, you reclaim the now with an intensity that the anxious mind can never achieve. You gain the freedom of the creature, the ability to act with total presence because the outcome is no longer your burden to carry. This shift has a profound effect on the human personality. The overthinker is usually paralyzed by analysis, stuck in a loop of indecision. The grounded individual, however, becomes a person of action. Because you are anchored in the vertical axis, the unchanging truths of faith and philosophy, the horizontal shifts of life, job loss, social friction, uncertainty, lose their power to destabilize you. You become like a mountain. The weather at the summit changes constantly, but the base is unmoved. This is the psychology of the cross, the intersection where the horizontal suffering of the world meets the vertical stability of the divine. To live in the Logos is to understand that your life has an objective weight. You're not a leaf in the wind, you are a stone in a cathedral. The path forward is not a one-time realization, but a continuous liturgy. You must treat your attention as a sanctuary that must be guarded daily. Every time you catch your mind drifting into the what if, you must gently but firmly pull it back to the I am. You use the breath, the sacred word, and the philosophical axiom as anchors to descend from the storm of the intellect into the peace of the heart. Over time, the neural pathways of anxiety wither from disuse, while the pathways of contemplative trust become the brain's new default mode. You are not just stopping overthinking, you are cultivating a new way of seeing. You are moving from the fragmented gaze of the ego to the unified vision of the soul. As you step back into the world, remember that the silence you have found is not the absence of sound, but the presence of God. The peace you feel is not the absence of problems, but the presence of an anchor. The world will continue to be loud, the future will remain uncertain, and the mind will occasionally try to return to its old habits of worry. But you now know the way back. You have discovered that underneath the turbulence of your thoughts lies a vast, deep ocean of stillness that has never been disturbed. By anchoring yourself to the eternal, you have finally found the only way to truly stop thinking and start being. You are grounded. You are present. You are home.